Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mark Holacek, coming to you once again from my hermitage in Lynchburg, from my study here. And today I'm going to talk to you about Thomas Jefferson's Platonic republicanism. Now, this might seem like a strange topic because Jefferson expressed hatred of Plato, and as we go on, we'll find out. So I'm going to argue that there were stark similarities between Jefferson's political views and Plato's. So let me begin. Thomas Jefferson was never shy about his execration of Plato. He told John Adams in 1814 that reading Plato's Republic, fraught with whimsies, puerilities, unintelligible jargon, was the heaviest taskwork I ever went through. It is not so astonishing that Jefferson would have had such an unsympathetic, even hostile view of Plato and his Republic, as Jefferson was a practical man, and one could argue that Plato was quixotic, especially in his Republic. Nonetheless, what is astonishing is that Jefferson could be so unsympathetic to a work that contains sentiments on morally sound government that are remarkably similar in certain respects in both substance and sentiment to Jefferson's own views. In at least four key respects, Jefferson's republicanism seems very much to follow the schema of Plato in Republic. Overall, each has a moral vision for the state. For Plato, his Republic; for Jefferson, his republicanism. And the possibility of each bringing into existence his ideal depends on four factors. Full participation by all members of the state, a certain structure or schema to be put into place that guarantees that each state is optimally virtuous, the governance of the most important affairs by the worthiest and best citizens, and finally and fourthly, an innovative and elaborate system of education to ensure success. The first commonality is full political participation on behalf of all members of a political community. When all citizens fulfill their duty for their fullest capacity, the state thrives. When the state thrives, each citizen will thrive, or nearly so. That's the argument. For Plato, full participation requires that the polis itself, the polis being the city-state, has self-control, in Greek sophrosine, a certain sort of mastery over pleasures and desires, and self-control comes through the recognition that all persons, Plato's laborers, guardians, and complete guardians, or rulers, must subordinate their wants and do what they can for the good of the polis. Guardians must protect and rule, laborers must agree to be protected and ruled. In that sense, self-control, a property of both persons and their polis, is a sort of harmony. Plato writes, "Is there any greater evil we can mention for a city?" Socrates says, "than that which tears it apart and makes it many instead of one, or any greater good than that which binds it together and makes it one." For Jefferson, full participation requires that every citizen has some degree of participation in governmental affairs. The many at the level of wards, the better in the schools, in the higher levels of government, and in employment that lends itself readily towards human progress. Every man, says Jefferson, must be a sharer in the direction of his ward republic of some of the higher ones. Every man must be a participator in the government of affairs, not merely at an election one day in the year, but every day. Full participation requires that every male be educated at some minimal level, the amount and degree of education being commensurate with the extent of each person's political participation and each person's political needs. The second commonality is that a well-running state must have a certain order or structure. Once constructed, it must be run in a manner that allows for integrity of its structure. In other words, it must continue to function in a politically responsible and morally sensitive manner. That structure need not to imply any particular sort of constitution. For Plato, there are 5 sorts of personality types, which are divided neatly into laborers and guardians, and only the guardians class, from which the rulers or complete guardians emerge, are educated. Though each group has its role, and each of these roles is critical, the role of the highest class, the rulers or complete guardians, is the most important in allowing for even the possibility of any degree of functional unity in a republic, once the republic is established. Thus, for Plato, justice is system-driven, and all persons play an important role. But the system is secured from the top down because of the virtue of the rulers guaranteed by their pedigree and education. The system thus guarantees that there will be virtuous persons, and virtuous persons ensure the virtue of the polis. Now, for Jefferson, there are the laboring, in other words, farmers and merchants and so forth, and the learned, the educators, lawyers, and politicians. The division is not decided by birth or wealth in the manner of John Adams' discourses on Davila, but by the rise of character and talent through perseverance, labor, and opportunity. Like Plato's Republic, justice is system-driven in that Jefferson advises that there be 4 tiers of government, and he proposes educational reform, systemic educational reform, to prompt political participation and to function as a check on political corruption. Thus, unlike Plato's Republic, the structure is secured chiefly from the bottom up. It is the citizens' education and participation at the level of ward governments that offers a stringent check on the ambitions and wants of those governing and excludes from offices greedy plutocrats and would-be tyrants. Now, the third commonality is that the state runs best when the best persons govern. For Plato, a healthy republic is possible only on condition that there be at least one fully virtuous person, though typically he thinks there'll be many, who consents to subordinate his happiness for the good of the state and thus to rule. That person, one whose soul is ordered, organized, and divine because of the order, organization, and divinity in his objects of study, will be a king that is a philosopher, and a philosopher that is a king. Says Socrates, no city, constitution, or individual man will ever become perfect until either some chance event compels those few philosophers who aren't vicious to take charge of a city, whether they want to or not, and compels the city to obey them, or until God inspires the present rulers and kings or their offspring with true erotic love for true philosophy. The structure of Plato's Republic, with its unique educational system, is put into place to ensure that the best persons, the Greek aristoi, both men and women, are in position to govern, and that is one of the unique features of Plato's system, as he recognized the equal capacities of women to function in the polis just as well as men, that is, to be rulers and even warriors. For Jefferson, in contrast, 4 tiers of government, wards, counties, states, and the nation, will be in place so that everyone has some participatory role in government, and that the morally superior, in other words, the natural aristoi, what he says in the letter to John Adams, will most likely be encouraged to govern at the highest levels. Jefferson writes, the natural aristocracy I consider as the most precious gift of nature for the instruction, the trust, and the government of society, and indeed it would have been inconsistent in creation to have formed man for the social state and not to have provided virtue and wisdom sufficient to sufficient to manage the concerns of the society. May we not even say that that form of government is the best which provides the most effectually for the pure selection of these natural aristoi in the offices of government? The way to ensure that the naturally best and not the artificially best rule is to leave the election of the governors in the hands of the people suitably educated. This, of course, is in stark contrast to the views of John Adams, who thought that beauty, wealth, and good birth were always going to have some key role, and Adams thought the most important roles in governing of any society. Now, the final commonality concerns need of an elaborate and systemic approach to education. For Plato, education is reserved for the guardians only and consists of a few years of physical training and harmonics. For those guardians that possess higher capacities, there are many years of mathematical training, 15 years of practical training in ruling, and 5 years of training in dialectic. The education of rulers ends at the age of 50 when they are ready to rule. I quote here, "At the age of 50, those who've survived the tests and been successful both in practical matters and in the sciences must be led to the goal and compelled to lift up the radiant light of their souls to what itself provides light for everything, in a tenebrous vision of the form of the good." Plato continues through Socrates. "Then they must each in turn put the city, its citizens, and themselves in order, using it as a model. Overall, the education of the complete guardians is thorough and rigorous. It aims to teach love of toil, truth, self-control, and greatness of soul." Megalopsukia in Greek. For Jefferson, in contrast, education conforms to the needs of each citizen. Again, the aims for Plato are top-down, for Jefferson are bottom-up. Jefferson writes to nephew Peter Carr, "It is highly interesting to our country, and it is the duty of its functionaries to provide that every citizen in it should receive an education proportioned to the conditions and pursuits of his life." So Jefferson is the first person really in the country to push the notion of elective education, or education relevant to the needs of a person. There is ward schooling for the many, the hoi polloi, college schooling for them with greater promise, and university schooling for those persons, for instance, who will be politicians and professors. As with Plato, Jefferson's elaborate system of education had two aims principally in mind: the development of civic virtue and intelligence and obedience to just government. Now, there are obvious differences on which I've expatiated in a longer paper published many years ago, but here space is prohibitive. Those disanalogies notwithstanding, there seems to be little reason to believe that key features of Plato's ideal republic in his great work Republic were incorporated in Jefferson's own vision of a thriving republic. In other words, in spite of Jefferson's insistence that he found reading Plato's Republic one of the most tiresome and difficult, one of the most onerous tasks he ever had to perform, key inspection of Jefferson's political philosophy and Plato's political philosophy reveals, I think to me, starkly that Jefferson really drew great inspiration and substance from Plato. I hope you enjoyed this little talk on the influence of Plato's political thinking on Jefferson, and if you do, please like the page and subscribe to under YouTube to Mark Holochek. Like my Facebook page, and on YouTube subscribe for further videos when they become manifest so you can watch them as they come up. Again, I have my Facebook page, Thomas Jefferson, Bring Him Home to Monticello, and numerous books that you can find on topics such as this. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.